Friends, may I invite the very important panel discussion, which is being led by Shailesh Haribhakti and my friend Gul. Please come on the stage. Shailesh Haribhakti and Gul. And I also would like to invite all the Consulate General on the stage. Okay, the Gul, I think, why don't you take over? But I want them to have a pleasant task. Okay, the pleasant task means you people have to take out one lucky draw, one of you, the gold coin, before you start.
Good afternoon, my dear Rotarians, Rotarians, and colleagues. Here I invite these wonderful colleagues of mine, one by one. Consul General of New Zealand, Ralph Hayes. Ralph, you're right here. Canadian Consul General Annie Dubé. Give her a big round. Swedish Consul General Ulrika Sandberg. Australian Consul General Tony Huber. And American Principal Officer Jennifer Lawson. They can all take out, all 7, all 6. They'll all take out. One. Okay. So one of you, Ulrika, would you like to take out a lucky number? Okay. We'll give ladies a chance.
The lucky number is 558. Uma Sesbuddhe, Rotary Club of Mumbai. Mahim, she's there? Oh, wow, wow. Congratulations, Umaji. Over to Gul.
Thank you, Governor. Shailesh, ladies and gentlemen, I want you to give all these constituents a big round of applause. A little logged up. I told them Rotarians can really applaud. Please have a seat. I'm also very happy to introduce my senior colleague, Shailesh Haribhakti, both of us presidents of Rotary Club of Bombay. But Shailesh, I ask you to please take over this event, and I'll sit here with you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Gul. Let me begin by welcoming each one of you onto this panel. I think we at the district conference are extremely fortunate to have a galaxy of consul generals from all over the world. What we are trying to present to you today is perhaps one of the biggest opportunities that is arising in the world today. The opportunity is for peace to break out. The opportunity is for conflicts to be resolved. And you will wonder why we are saying this despite the fact that we are seeing so many situations which on the face of it seem to be going wrong. Let me just say, and let me ask the first question, is there a power shift happening which is moving the power away from governments and taking that power into communities, particularly in the context of the fact that we have had no major war for a very long period of time. So is the power shifting, and is the power actually getting into the hands of communities? I'd request you to start.
Sure. Hi, how are you doing? Well, it's a large question that I don't think we'll be able to cover today, but when I look at the Arab Spring or other events that took place in a recent history, we can see a shift, and I would agree that there's been a democratization of conflicts somehow. It's grassroots level, it's people coming together through social media. So there's a lot of tools now available so that communities that have specific interests that were not necessarily captured in economic prosperity in the past are raising their voice. Economic prosperity has been the most important factor to prevent war. That's why the EU was created, I suspect, back in the days, a part of it, so that economic prosperity would make sure that there's not another world war. We have a situation where we want to make sure that our prosperity is for all. Women, girls are not affected the same way in conflicts as men and boys. And we want to make sure that they are part of the solution because it's a man-made world.
Absolutely. So, Tony, would you like to add to that from maybe a technology perspective and the fact that there is so much capacity to destroy that in itself creates the potential for the balance or the détente?
Sure. Look, I'll give you a little bit of speculation because I don't think that I can really give anything authoritative. We've got a few views here, and this will be one. I think that we certainly have changes that are underway in the world. There seems to have been an erosion of confidence in many institutions that we had prized in the past. And if that's to be interpreted as a shift to individualism, then so be it. We also are seeing that there's a rise of individualism, which is being fueled by technology and changes in the world. And I think that that was the point that I think that the chairperson has asked me about. You know, there are many issues that are happening in the world at the moment that we read about in the newspapers daily. Many of these things impact socially, but technology and change, I think, is the greatest agent at the moment, and I think that has come about partly because there has been an erosion of confidence in a lot of institutions. As we've seen, many of the larger problems in the world have not been addressed to the extent that we would like to see those things addressed. So, you know, I've probably highlighted more of the problem than actually giving you answers, but that is how I see it. And maybe, you know, that may be drawing a long bow and may have been opening the subject area up, but that's how I see it. Thank you.
So may I throw the ball to Jennifer and ask whether you see a contrarian position emerging out of the U.S., where the...
I'm sorry, this speaker is not, I can't hear you.
Sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Is that better?
Yeah, yes.
Okay. So I just wanted to check whether there's a contrary position emerging out of the U.S., particularly as the government is doing something which we've not seen in the past, withdrawing from war theaters. So is that a way that power is being captured in a reverse sort of sense?
I wouldn't necessarily say that it's power in a reverse sense. I mean, I think withdrawing from theaters and conflict resolution is something that we all are, you know, aspiring for. In terms of communities and alternate communities, I mean, I'm going to agree with my colleagues that whether it be in large government, whether it be in banks, whether it be in other institutions, there is an erosion of confidence. And you're finding that I think communities find it easier and easier to be more independently powerful. And I actually think that's a really positive thing.
Wonderful. So, Ulrika, would you like to add a different perspective from Sweden?
Yeah, but I think since I represent another part of the world, I'm not sure I share your view on whether we are living in a less conflict-prone atmosphere, because we have Russia invading Ukraine, we have Russia in the US withdrawing from a treaty which actually regulated the number of nuclear weapons on the European soil. So we feel that we are living in a more uncertain time than for a long, long time, since the fall of the Berlin Wall. As, we also see that there is an erosion of multilateralism, be it a blocked Security Council unable to act on Syria or Yemen, other conflicts which really touches I think everybody's heart and soul when you see the starving children of Yemen. And of course, the erosion of institutions, be it the WTO, and a sort of rules-based order. So I'm not sure we're living the best of times, frankly.
Wonderful. Ralph, New Zealand is perhaps protected by geography, and maybe yours is a country which has seen least amount of actual conflict in a very long time. So how does the power equation work between the government and the communities?
Well, you're right. I think on the World Peace Index, we're at number 2 behind Iceland. And so you're right, and our geography plays a part in how we participate in the world. But for us being an island nation, we have to look out, and it's building those connections are important. And I think a lot of the institutions are about countries coming together to work on solutions such as climate change, food security, jobs, distribution of wealth, and women's rights. These aren't the type of things that individual countries can take control of. We have to work as a group to solve these sort of issues. One of the things around you saying, you mentioned just quickly around the power shift happening from the world, from government to communities. I think another word, just a sort of slight different angle, is communities. I would see moving into the private sector. A lot of the power, the governments are divulging things like the welfare state. They're moving things like pensions, the health system. A lot of that is a challenge as they try to privatise those things. And are those the type of things that you can commercialize as such?
That's so interesting. I mean, it looks like the convergence is towards the idea of making sure that the peace remains sustained. And it requires the effort of almost every economic interest. So can I have a very quick round of responses from each one of you, in any order, on what are you all doing in your role as Consul Generals to promote this idea of conflicts being resolved in order that peace remains longer and the communities can actually pick up the challenge which is being posed by the continuous thrust of technology from all sides, changing the world so quickly, creating absolutely new challenges every day. So what are you all doing in your roles to make this whole communication more effective?
Canada has a feminist foreign policy. So to get started, our priority is seeing everything we do through the lens of, is it going to benefit equally men and women and minority communities? So peace and security is through the lens of how are women and girls affected. And if we implement an initiative, we want to make sure that the impact towards women and girls is sustainable. Because when women are participating in peace and conflict resolution, the peace is more enduring. And having this aspect, this framework for us is very important. And so everything we do is through the gender equity lens. It includes also economic prosperity. If you look at the initiatives we want to support for entrepreneurs and for any trade. It's about supporting women in their approach, because a woman can lift a village out of poverty. And if you have much more to lose when it's time for a conflict, you may think twice before starting a conflict. So eradicating poverty, making sure that your population equally benefits from the economic prosperity, will really be the best prevention.
Lovely. Tony, would you?
I agree with Annie that we see things through the prism of what we represent. We're here to represent our individual countries, and in doing that, we represent the values and defend our relevant values of each of our countries. So what Australia does, for example, is we articulate our policies and we look to represent those as best we can through whatever means and institution we see as being fit for the purpose. When I mentioned earlier that we were witnessing an erosion of values, an erosion of confidence, I should say, and that there was a change of relativities into new areas through technology, and that individualism and communities were using these new technologies to assert their interests more and take some of the responsibility for some areas where nations were perhaps being seen as less up to taking things forward. What I meant was that we are looking at how we can do things better, and we're looking at a range of media, and we're looking at institutions that we can improve the rules. So it's a system of continuous improvement, a little bit like the corporates do, that we as governments, or we as Australia, I should say, I can only speak for Australia, that we look to improve things, that there is a changing of technologies and platforms and institutions, that we need to renew, we need to renovate, we need to innovate. Much of the catch cries that you see for some of the new technologies employed in the corporate sector, we seek to do that with some of the architecture that governs the world and governs our countries and sets standards and those sorts of things. So right across the board, that is the sort of tradecraft that we seek to employ and take forward in our roles as representatives of, or I do, as a representative of Australia overseas. Thank you.
You know, one of the ideas that seems to be very strongly prevalent is ESG, environmental sustainability, social responsibility, and governance. No investment is moving out, particularly from the sovereign funds, without an accent on all these three. And maybe Ulrika, from Sweden's perspective, you can connect up the fact that the world is beginning to talk in terms of these ideas, ESG and the technology thrust, the convergence of technology, singularity, all of these notions are trying to take people away from the thought that conflict will resolve or get any advantage, and into the thought that peace and resolution will.
No, I think what we agreed upon in 2015, the Agenda 2030 with the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, is really what we are trying to achieve, and those are set to be realized by 2030. And it's everything from poverty alleviation to, of course, clean cities, clean water, health, sexual and reproductive health and rights, women's rights, public-private partnerships. So, of course, we put a lot of emphasis on trying to both implement the Agenda 2030 back home, but also help other countries in doing that, and notably India. We feel that India is maybe one of the most important actors in the implementation, be it of the Paris Agreement on fighting climate change, or on the Agenda of 2030, because obviously, depending on which road India chooses, we will have achieved them or we will not have achieved them by 2030. That also means you need to work on issues like democracy, you need to work on issues like human rights, and just as my Canadian colleague was alluding to, we need to also work for covering the whole population. So that means inclusion of women as well in this process.
Wonderful. Ralph, what would you say is the big thrust coming out of New Zealand in terms of dealing with these notions?
I mean, I agree with my colleagues here in most of the values and things like that. I think at the moment New Zealand's number one in the world for World Bank Ease of Doing Business, but also our female Prime Minister, Jacinda Ardern, and women's empowerment. New Zealand was the first country in the world to give women the vote back in 1893. So these are the type of messages I think that are resonating, and as Ulrika's mentioned, around having the whole population contributing to the wealth and being able to make a decision and dictate how you manage growth and prosperity.
Wonderful. So, Ferb, would you like to add to this conversation?
I'll say a few words. First of all, thank you for having us here. This is a wonderful opportunity to be with my colleagues. And I think, among us in the United States, we probably have the largest Indian diaspora population amongst the participants here. What we try to do here in Mumbai is, if we can agree that, say, conflict is a product of trying to dominate resources, we try to give people access to resources, whether that be education, whether that be maternal and child health, whether that be a chance to travel, for example. Those are things that we try to promote here, as well as people-to-people ties. Again, just because the ties between our two countries are so strong. We also have a number of opportunities for access to technology, whether that be at the consulate itself, where we have an open library, or whether that be through different kinds of grants. But I think for all of us, it's quite a privilege to be here in Mumbai, in the city, to be doing exactly what we're doing, which is representing our countries.
Wonderful. We are seeing that some of the parameters by which we judge outcomes are changing dramatically. I think the erstwhile single criteria of GDP growth seems to be giving way to gross national happiness, a concept which has evolved somewhere around this part of the world. The one government that I know puts a great deal of store by it is the government of Bhutan. The Prime Minister himself evangelizes this idea very eloquently. So, do you all see this as a shift that is helping the world to get more peaceful and more conflict resolved, if you like? Yeah, Ulrika, you have the mic.
Yes, no, I think we're all struggling with realizing that the old GDP growth index is not really representative of any sort of living standard or how people actually perceive their lives. So I think we all are in the quest of trying to find some other way of measuring this. And the happiness index is, of course, one way of trying to tackle this. We would support it because it means that you have to implement the Agenda 2030. In essence, it would boil down to that.
What you talked about, the convergence of the SDGs and the way things are changing, I was in your country this last year, and I saw that there's so much of walking, bicycling, people out in restaurants enjoying themselves. It's a very different kind of evolution that one sees. And I see that reflected in all the countries on this particular panel.
But what is also interesting is that it's a neighboring country of mine, Finland, that is actually on the top of the happiness index. Yeah. And India is in 118th place. So there is a lot of room for improvement. But I think that's also one of the reasons why we are here. We are here to share our experiences, our best practices, the solutions that we can offer. And I keep coming back to the choices that India makes are absolutely determining how the world is going to look in the next coming decades.
Absolutely. perspective from Canada?
Well, it depends how you define happiness, I suspect. Canada ranks really well internationally in terms of quality of life, and I'm sure if there's probably a happiness index as well. What makes people satisfied with their life in the end is access to opportunities, and I think that the GDP model is one of many performance indicators for an economy, but job creation to me and valuable job creation should be more of a focus if you want to have an economic performance indicators. Because when you have your population that access quality jobs and they can fulfill their full potential, then you can start thinking of, okay, well, once they have these opportunities and they can move up in terms of quality of life, then we're talking about real impact for the populations.
Ralph, how do you see that happening in your part of the world?
Well, I think, New Zealand's passed what we call a wellness budget, which is a slight variance on happiness, I think. And for us, we agree that GDP shouldn't be the only measure. And other areas for us around lenses we're looking through is the human capital, which is people and skills. The social capital, which is our connections, is important, so measuring the outcomes on that. Natural capital, which is measuring our environment, the impact on our environment for generating revenue and profit and prosperity. Then there's also the financial and physical aspects, which are we using our assets to their full potential? Are we winding them down, or are we enhancing our assets? So New Zealand's looking to look through other lenses beyond GDP. So, we realise, and for us, slight difference is that wellness we see as the platform rather than pure happiness. You can give someone an ice cream and they're happy, but,
Yeah. But, what we are seeing is that the media is accentuating the situations which are actually going wrong and which are extreme in nature. Whereas the reality that we experience in terms of the number of people traveling, moving across borders, experiencing different cultures is leading us to think that maybe the world has a chance for peace to break out. What do you feel from the point of view of the US? Is that something that you kind of sense if you get out of the mainstream media and television and all the...
Yeah, I think you raise a very good point about the mainstream media being a very loud actor in the room and not necessarily one that everybody feels represented by. I would say that absolutely. I mean, when you look at, and the United States obviously has a way to go, but when you look at how many women are elected, for example, to a government, that's one indication of how well a country is doing. I'm really thrilled that we have so many women nominees now for the next presidential elections, for example. United States is, you could say, a country of individualists, and I think happiness means being able to direct your own destiny. And if you feel like you can do that, if you have the access to a job, if you want a job, or to family, if you want that, that is a much better indication of happiness than GDP. In terms of gross national happiness, I love that as an indicator, or as one of many indicators. But I mean, I think we can all agree that that money is certainly not the be-all and end-all of how a citizen feels in his or her country.
I'm told the most popular class at Harvard Business School is a class which talks about happiness. So obviously it's a leading indicator, which has not hit any of the news headlines. Any thoughts which would contribute to this idea from Australia that you would like to add, Tony?
I don't think that I could add anything beyond those thoughts other than the perspective that I share with Ralph, and that is that it's a relative thing. I think that happiness can peak at certain times and drop, and it's a little bit like trying to predict an election. Nobody knows what is going to happen until it comes to the time. Many will speculate at the time. The factors that define the outcome are very, very different.
Gul, you've been quiet through the entire panel discussion. I'm feeling sorry that you have not had a chance to give your words of wisdom. So you have 2 minutes, and then we have a 1 minute each for each of the panelists to sum up.
Thank you, Shailesh. That is very important that each one of them should have an opportunity to give their final comments. I don't have any comments about conflict. Iceland stands number 1 in the peace index in the world. So to the extent that we don't even have army in Iceland. So you can understand that we are all for peace. But my colleagues here, I'm very happy that they have expressed their opinions. And now I would like them to give their last 1 minute to the Rotarians here. Ladies and gentlemen, my Rotarian colleagues, they are all the future Rotarians on the stage with me from the Rotary Club of Bombay. So I blackmailed you all, so now you can please give your
You don't have a feminist policy, some sort?
None whatsoever.
So the last minute on Canada's position on peace and conflict resolution. Well, our feminist foreign policy demands that our approach in diplomacy, trade, security and development fully take into account the needs of women and girls in all of their diversity. Because we know the impact is greater, the results are more sustained, and the benefits more widespread. And this is the core of Canada's approach.
I'm totally impressed by the way that throughout all your observations, this one string has been constant. So I really compliment you for that, and it seems like it is a very firmly held view.
Well, I would like to congratulate you in having a gender equal panel as well. It's rare. Thank you.
Thank you.
So my minute and a half of summing up is going to go like this. Everything that Annie said I agree with, because Australia and Canada are very, very like-minded, and she's articulated it all. So my last minute is going to be that that I think that, look, it's a complex series of things that we were asked to discuss today. Conflict resolution has a range of things that contribute to the solutions, and I believe that as long as we can find mechanisms and ways to work cooperatively, my responsibility as a diplomat is to try and find those pathways so that our country's values and aspirations and our people can continue to have a peaceful existence in the world. We're very fortunate where we are located. We have a geographical location living in the southern hemisphere, where there's only 10% of the population, but we do pay very close interest to the affairs of the world, and I think that the issues that we've discussed today are certainly rich things that will be issues we'll reflect on over the next year. Thank you.
Thank you. Yep, Ralph.
Okay, so look, as a diplomat, New Zealand's qualities that I carry with me is we've got sort of three broad areas. Kaitiaki, which is a Maori word for to say that we are guardians of people, place and the planet. We're only here for a short period of time, so guardians of the environment. The other one is ingenuity, so it's with that spirit of exploration, adventure and creativity that we turn ideas into reality to try and solve the problems that others can't. And the third one is integrity. What we say we'll do, we will do. We do the right thing because it's the right thing to do. So that's the values that New Zealand carries.
Great.
Thank you.
Great
Yes,
insight.
no,
Yeah,
I think the Swedish foreign policy really can be summarized in 3 R's and 4 D's. One has to do with women's rights, women's representation, and resources for women.
Wonderful.
Tackling your peace and conflict aspect is, of course, implementation of democracy and all human rights. Diplomacy as a first line of defense. Shared responsibility for peace and security. And then fighting autocratic regimes.
Brilliant. Wonderful way. The 3 R's and the 4 D's. We'll remember that for long. Thank you.
It works better in Swedish.
I'm sure it does, but you would have lost all of us.
Jennifer,
Yes.
over to you.
Jennifer.
I think from our perspective, I would say that it's certainly a democracy. The democratically elected governments are one way to, if not ensure peace and lack of conflict, to help mitigate that. We would also and agree with my colleagues that women's participation, whether it be in civil society, whether it be in government, whether it be in the workplace and education, is critical. And the better allocation of resources amongst individuals is also a major, I think, would be a major help in reducing conflict.
Well, you know, if I were to put together the 5 big themes that emerged for me from this panel discussion, one is that 50% of the population of the world should have 50% of the participation in it. And I think that's something that we in India are now beginning to realize a little late, but we are catching up very fast. And I think this kind of conversation really brings back the focus on making sure that that fairness needs to be established. And I'm sure this audience would take great heart in it. We at one time had a situation where the preponderance of Rotary membership was of men. Today that has changed. In our Rotary Club, in the year that I was president, we had 50% board members as women, and all of them have now become presidents of our Rotary Club. So that was a very wonderful theme that you all put together. Sorry, Gold.
I just wanted to say that we have a regret from one other Consul General, the Brazilian Consul General, who's also a lady.
Wow.
So had she been here, we had 66% ladies and 33% men. So, you know.
So the second takeaway was that really the accent is moving away from the reported news, which would lead you to believe that there is strife and there is uncertainty and there is volatility. Whereas really, the engagement seems to be in all your countries with implementing the SDGs, which I think has become an extremely strong, riveting kind of idea around which a lot of thought processes, whether it is at boards or whether it is at government level or at regulation level or even at the community level. I think the SDGs have been able to actually focus people's mind on what needs to be done. I didn't hear as much about environment responsibility or sustainability, but maybe that was not part of the subject. But it seems like underlying everything is the common theme that if we don't have clean water and clean air, what are we going to do in any case? Where is all this peace and conflict going to get us? And so it did come through in a subtle way that is also a very important part of what we're doing. And then the point that Ulrika made about social responsibility and making sure that, and you made, Jennifer, about making sure that there is distributive justice in order that the fruits of peace and conflict resolution are seen to be more widespread. That came out very strongly. And above all, I think the vote that all of you gave to the fact that we will have a sustainable human race and a sustainable world because all of these forces are beginning to take root was to me the biggest takeaway from this panel. And I would like to thank this wonderful audience for participating in this conversation, and I hope we've left behind for you some food for thought to mull over and to put into implementation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Salis, for conducting so well. I mean, fantastic. And we were sitting there and we were talking about something. We were talking about this session. And let me tell you, people were saying that I think this is something very interesting and we should give a serious note in future. Let's see. Okay. Thank you. May I request to bring the plaque first? Citation plaque. May May I request Vijay to read out citation? I'm going by, yeah.
This Rotary International District 3141 is pleased to honor Tony Huber and confer upon him the award. Tony, may I request you to please come up front? And confer upon him the award for promoting international peace and understanding and promoting international understanding as Counsel General of Australia. Ladies and gentlemen, may I request you to put your hands together with a round of applause for Tony. Signed by the Governor, Shashi Kumar Sharma, and the RIPR, the Rotary International President's representative, Kamal Sanghvi. My pleasure, sir, to give it to you.
Thank you. I'll read this citation for Annie Dubé. Rotary International District 3141 is pleased to honor Miss Annie Dubé and confer upon her Award for Promoting International Peace and Understanding for promoting international understanding as Consul General of Canada in Mumbai, Annie Dubé. Give her a big round of applause, please. Thank you, Anne.
Rotary International District 3141 is pleased to honor Mr. Ralph Hayes. Ralph, please step forward. And confers upon him award for promoting international peace and understanding, for promoting international understanding as Consul General New Zealand. Signed, Rotarian Shashi Kumar Sharma, the District Governor, Rotarian Kamal Sanghvi, RIP Representative, and Rotarian Ashwin Shetty, Conference Chair.
Thank you. May I request RIPR?
Rotary International District 3141 is pleased to honor you, ma'am, Ms. Jennifer Larson, and confer upon you the award of promoting international peace and understanding for promoting international understanding as Consul General, USA. It's my proud pleasure and honor to present you.
Congratulations. Congratulations.
This is for Ulrika Sundberg, Consul General for Sweden. Ulrika, I apologize that due to a little mix-up at the last minute, your plaque is not yet here, but it'll be coming to you. In the meantime, we want to honor you and give you this shawl, and I'll ask the Governor to please put this shawl around you. So, but I want to thank you. Lovely. So we'll want you to come back again. All right, Ulrika? That's a deal. Give her a big round of applause. Ulrika Sundberg, Consul General for Sweden. Winter in Sweden. Thank you. Thank you, Ulrika.
It's a pleasure to give to Sailesh Bhai because we've known each other for about more than 35 years. Rotary International District 3140 is pleased to honor Sailesh Hari Bhakti and confer upon him the Vocational Excellence Award for its exemplary knowledge of and vast experience in the field of legal compliances. One of the things that he does, besides the chartered accountancy company that he runs. Signed by Sashi Kumar Sharma and Kamal Sanghvi, the RIP.
Thank you very much.
With pleasure to a friend of mine.
Pleasure receiving it from
Can I give it to you back? I'll put it in a bag and they'll put it in a box.
Yeah, I'll
Just give it to her.
This is for Gul Kriplani, our very own Rotarian, Rotary International District 3141, is pleased to honor Rotarian Gul Kriplani and confer upon him the award of promoting international peace and understanding for promoting international peace and understanding through initiatives like this which have far-reaching